international humanitarian law and human rights. He will speak on the human rights mechanisms and the new UN working group on UNDROP. We will not have a Q&A in between the two inputs, so after Christophe's input, we immediately have Geneviève Savigny. She is the Chair-Rapporteur of the new working group on UNDROP. She will speak about challenges and opportunities of this new working group, and we also hope that she will present us a little bit what the plans of the groups are for the coming months or for the next year. Then, so after that, we open the floor for questions, comments, and discussion. If you have if you have comments and questions during the presentations, please either write them in the chat for afterwards. If it's a question of understanding where you get stopped and you don't understand something, you write it into the chat and Christophe and then Geneviève try to respond to you after their presentation, but only the questions of clarification. This is the morning program. So in the afternoon, for those who would like to join us in the afternoon, we will give space to deepen what we have heard in the morning and to discuss in smaller groups how we can engage with the new working group. So we thought that it is best to do it in regional groups, and we will have those geographic groups that are of the same language. The group work will be presented or reported back in the plenary afterwards for a final discussion. And we also hope that somehow we can have a final discussion around how we could work across groups, regional groups or networks. With that, I would like to hand over to Christophe Golay, Senior Research Fellow of Geneva Academy. So please, Christophe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claudia. It's a great pleasure for me to co-organize this training with the RAISE project and Fastenaktion. And it's really great to have with us this morning Geneviève Savigny, who is the chair of the working group. What I will say today will be in a publication that will be released before the end of the year in English, Spanish, and French. So the Academy, with the RAISE project, we will publish something on the working group and how you can engage with the working group. It will be made available in all languages that we speak today. I will introduce the UN human rights system and see what the UN working group could potentially do. I will use the example of the Special Rapporteur on the right to food to see how a similar mechanism has worked on the right to food, but also on the rights of peasants and other people working in rural areas. I will just now share my screen just to explain to you because we have put lots of references in the program of today. Okay, and this program is also in the website, Defending Peasants' Rights. If you do not know, that's a website that is on only on UNDROP. It is in English, French, and Spanish. So in this reference, it's in the program of the day that you have received. You have the direct link in French, English, and Spanish to the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and other people working in rural areas. You have a link to the resolution of the Council that created the working group. You have the link to the website of the working group of the UN, the website of the UN that I will present. You have the code of conduct of special procedures that also applies to the work of the working group. You have recommendations made by the CEDAW committee on the discrimination against women. They did a recommendation on the rights of rural women, in which that is very also important for the work. You have a general comment of the Committee on Economic and Social Rights on land and how it is related to economic and social rights. You have the website of the Special Chapter on the Right Food that I will use this morning. You have the website Defending Peasants' Rights. That's the one that on which I have this, on which I am now. You have a fact sheet published by CETIM, La Via Campesina, and FIAN on the promotion and implementation of UNDROP. You have a publication that I did some years ago on the work of UN Human Rights Mechanism on UNDROP. You have the work of the Geneva Academy on UNDROP. You have a civil society, the RAISE project presented also to you. Then there is a number of publications by La Via Campesina on UNDROP, and then thematically on access to resources, on peasants' rights and food production, on the dignified life and livelihood, and on peasants as political subjects. You have a book by CETIM on the declaration, on the history of the declaration. You have also lots of training sheets of CETIM on the different rights of the declaration. You have FIAN's peasants briefings, okay? They have done briefings on the different peasants' rights of the declaration. And then you have a list of videos. It's videos done by La Via Campesina, the UN Declaration Explained. You have a video on the next struggles that was our last webinar a few months ago. And then you have also another webinar we did that a year and a half ago. And then you have another videos. You have videos on training that you can use on UNDROP. Okay, so trainings were prepared on UNDROP, different rights of UNDROP, and you can have access to them in the 3 languages. Okay, so now as an introduction to this morning, so the human rights system at the United Nations, you have what also we call treaty bodies. Okay, that's for all the 10 most important human rights treaties. There is a treaty body. It's a group for economic social rights, for example. It is 18 experts, and they examine the state reports, the states that have accepted the treaty. Okay, then, for example, on the right to food, which is part of economic social rights, it's 170, more than 170 states who have to report every 5 years to the committee. Okay. This committee can also receive communications and write what they call general comment, in which they define the right. For example, the right to food was defined 20 years ago by this committee. Okay, so that's one aspect of the UN system. Okay, that you can use, but it will not be the topic of today because we will concentrate on the working group. Okay, but just to know that this also exists, and what is important to know is that these treaty bodies, they are linked to the ratification, to the acceptance of the treaties by the state in which you work. Okay, we will see that it is not the same for the working group. The working group can act on any case of violation, for example, of rights of peasants in the whole world. It is not dependent on the fact that your country accepted a treaty. Okay. Then another possibility that mechanism that exists, it was created by the Human Rights Council. Okay, Human Rights Council was created in 2006. They have 47 states, and what they have as a mechanism is called the Universal Periodic Review. Okay, every state is revised every 4 years on the realization of human rights in the country. Okay, and there you have a possibility to do a parallel report as an NGO. Okay, so I'll just share my screen to show you an example of what we did in 2023. So we have a coalition in Switzerland. It's called the Swiss Coalition of the Friends of the Declaration of Rights of Peasants. And we have done a submission on so that's the group of the coalition with La Via Campesina in Switzerland. It's called Humanitarian and many organizations. And so we have done a report for this Universal Periodic Review on the foreign policy of Switzerland and the impact on UNDROP. Okay, for example, we have something on trade and the impact of trade, or the free trade agreements on the right to seeds, and then we make recommendations. Okay, we have done another one on the implementation of the declaration in Switzerland. Okay, so that's so we sent 2 reports in 2023 for this universal periodic review. And then, for example, we highlighted many problems or violations of the rights of peasants in Switzerland. And we, for example, one was the fact that in Switzerland, peasant women, they don't have a social security system. So that's usually problematic. Of course, there is an article on social security in the declaration. So we used this article and said that it was a violation. Then you have to, at the UPR, you have to find states who do recommendations to Switzerland, and we found recommendations. And so we have a recommendation since last year to Switzerland to protect social security for peasant women. Okay, and Switzerland then accepted the recommendation, and so now we're working with the parliament to see to make sure that it will be done. Okay, but it was initiated the discussion with this report that we did to the UN in 2023 in what is called the Universal Periodic Review. Okay, that's one possibility of what you can do as an NGO. Okay, now I'll stop with that, and then I will speak about what the working group will be doing. Okay, so you know that the declaration, that's the declaration that we have. It was adopted in 2018. Okay, after 6 years of negotiation. And it was adopted by the Human Rights Council and then by the General Assembly. And then in October last year, there is this resolution of the Council that created the working group. Okay, so we will come with Geneviève now on the mandate of the working group, and but the working group was created by the Human Rights Council in October by a resolution, by a vote. And the vote was 38 states in favor of this resolution, 2 against, and 7 abstention. What is important to know is that at the council, you don't need to have a consensus. Okay, so it's sufficient to have a simple majority, but there it was a huge majority. Okay, even a larger majority than when the declaration was adopted in 2018. Okay, we had new states supporting the creation of the working group and UNDROP, like Germany, like Belgium, who was never in favor of the declaration before. So there is an increase, let's say, of the support to the declaration and to the working group in the states of the council. Okay, then when let's say we quickly go to the working group, it's a web page of the working group that is also in the reference, so it's on the official web page. So she will of course talk about it, Geneviève, but you have the 5 members of the working group, okay, that were elected, nominated by the Human Rights Council president in March, from Colombia, India, Armenia, Nigeria, and France. And then you have the mandate of the working group. Okay, so there is the mandate that is in the resolution. Okay. I'm sure that Geneviève will talk about it. And then in the methods of work, what is important is that the working group will make use of a common set of tools available to special procedures mandate, the thematic reports, the country visits, and the communications. Okay, so that's the 3 main tools that they have. The thematic report, the first one, will be presented by Geneviève in Geneva on the 18th of October, 18th of September, in a few weeks. And so we will have some information about the content. And they didn't do any country visits for the moment, and I guess no communications. So that's why I will use the example of the Special Rapporteur on the right to food to see how it is done and what the working group could potentially do. Okay, so if you look at the Special Rapporteur on the right to food, so I was working with the first one between 2000 and 2008. So I worked with the Special Rapporteur on the right to food, and I did many country visits. And so if you look at the thematic reports, okay, that's one example of what the working group will do. It will do thematic reports. So the Special Rapporteur on the right to food did the last one was on fisheries, okay, presented in March. Okay, and in this report on fisheries, he included many reference to UNDROP, and also made recommendations linked to UNDROP. He did also report on conflict and the right food. He did a report on the COVID pandemic. He also did a report in 2022 on seeds, right to life and farmers' rights, in which he's using a lot the declaration and the Article 19 on the right to seeds of the declaration. He did a report on food systems, etc. And the first report he did was the 2021 on the vision of the special on the right food. You know, he announced that his priority will be, he announced that it will be trade, that it will be conflict, etc. That was announced in his first report to the Human Rights Council in March 2021. Okay, and then you have the reports of the other special rapporteurs. Okay, before him, it's every 6 years. They have a mandate of maximum 6 years every special rapporteur. So I was working with the one on the between 2001 and 2008. So for example, we did a report on transnational corporations, on trade. This report of the 2004 on the food sovereignty. There was lots of, let's say, lobby work done by La Via Campesina and CETIM and FIAN, so that we cover this topic, okay, food security and food sovereignty in 2004. So that's something that you could try to do with the working group. You could try to convince them to focus on particular topics for their thematic report. Okay. Then we also did something on fisheries. We did something on extraterritorial obligations, responsibilities of transnational corporations, etc., etc. Then after us, it was Olivier Scouter. He started in 2008 and until 2014, and he did, for example, a report. He did also a report on seeds in 2009. And he did a report on land in 2010, okay, in which he added an annex, addendum, with human rights principles, okay? So that was a new, let's say, soft law instrument. So he proposed guidelines and principles that should be respected by states when they give land to companies, okay? It was called large-scale land acquisitions and leases. We called that land grabbing, but he chosen to call them large-scale land acquisitions and leases. And he proposed, he said there are 11 principles that the states should respect when they give land to companies. Okay, so participation, consultation, access to remedy, etc., etc. So that was kind of soft law instrument that he created in an annex to his mandate. So that's something that is also possible. But of course, the working group, there is already the declaration. So I mean, maybe it's not necessary to do new instruments, but that's something that the Special Rapporteur on Right Food did. Okay, then when I go back to the page of the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, you can see that there was a in this page, and it's the same for the working group. It will be there were calls for input. Okay, so that's when you can contribute to the work of the Special Rapporteur or the working group. Okay, before doing is done now, he will present a report on starvation. Okay, to the UN General Assembly. So he did it is closed now because it was open a few months ago. Because now he's finalizing his report, but he's doing a report on human rights and starvation with the emphasis on the Palestine, food sovereignty, and he was asking NGOs and partners to send information. Okay, that's something that you can do. You can send information to the Special Rapporteur, to the working group. Also, he did a visit to Venezuela. Okay, and before going to Venezuela, he did ask for information about the right food in Venezuela. And again, you could send information to the Special Rapporteur on the right food in Venezuela. And when the working group will do country visits, the same can be done. Of course, when they do, now I go to the country visits. So as I said, I worked now between 2001 2008 with the Special Rapporteur on Right to Food. So we were to Niger, we were to Bangladesh, Brazil, Palestine, Ethiopia, Mongolia, Guatemala, Niger again, India, Lebanon, Bolivia, Cuba. At that time, we could do 2 missions per year. I think that the budget now is a bit reduced, so maybe it is only 1 mission per year to be seen. for example, in Brazil, we were there in 2002. Okay, and again, the civil society can try to say to the working group or to the special rapporteur, you should go to this country. Okay, and also civil society from the country could ask the special rapporteur to go, or to the working group to go to the country. In Brazil, we spent 3 weeks, I think. So it depends. It can be 10 days, it can be 2 weeks, it can be 3 weeks of travel. And we did many activities with civil society. And also we collected lots of information from civil society organizations, okay? And then we wrote a report on the right food in Brazil with recommendations to the government, okay? It was in 2002, and Lula started his mandate in 2003. So we had a huge collaboration with Lula, the government of Lula during his mandate between 2003 and 2010. Then Palestine, we did a report on the right food in Palestine. Ethiopia, one of the main issues in Ethiopia was the fact that the food aid in Ethiopia was coming from the US through the World Food Program. And so we were insisting that the food aid should also come from the region or from the country itself. Guatemala, one of the main issues was the rights of indigenous peoples. There was a 36 civil war in Guatemala, and they were evicted from their land during the war, and there was a peace agreement at the end, and that says that they should go back to their land, but they were never given the right to go back to their land. So that was one of the main issues. And again, we worked a lot with civil society in Guatemala. India is another example. We went in 2005 to India. Since 2001, there is a right to food campaign in India led by civil society organizations. So that's with them that we also organized the mission. There is a right to food case before the Supreme Court of India since 2001. Okay, and so the Supreme Court is forcing the government in all the states of India to implement food assistance schemes. So we were there in 2005. We did a 2 days colloquium with judges of the whole part of India on the role of judges in implementing the right to food, in protecting the right to food. So they used, the civil society, they used the visit of the special rapporteur, let's say, to do an official meeting of 2 days with judges of the whole country. Okay, Bolivia, we went there 2007. That was Evo Morales was there as the president since 1 year. They had revised the constitution, included the right to food, the right to land, the rights of indigenous peoples in the constitution, and so that was a very also positive moment. And in the years after, we collaborated with Bolivia on the protection of the right to food in the country. And again, the role of civil society was very important in our mission to Bolivia. Okay, so that's and so you can see that they did many country visits since 2001. Then the other possibility and the mandate are communications. Okay, so we can see it's when you click to communications, there are two things. First, you can on the web page of the Special Rapporteur on Right Food, you can go to submit complaints. And you will have a page where it is what are communications, okay? And it is explained. Mainly there are two kinds of communication. One is about violations of the human rights that has already happened. It's called a letter of allegation. And you send information to the working group or to the special rapporteur on the violation. And the other one is called urgent appeals. And it is when there is a violation that is threatening the life of the people, or and that's called urgent appeals. And normally you should have a quick reaction by the experts. So past human rights violations, ongoing human rights violations, or it can also be about a bill, a legislation, a policy or practice that is not in conformity with human rights. So the rights of peasants or the right to food, for example. Okay. When we go back to the special rapporteur on the right to food page, when you go to the communications that he wrote, you write in this page, and you can see that, for example, in January this year, okay, there was a communication that was sent by 6 experts, okay, on housing, arbitrary detention, business, development, food, and indigenous peoples, okay. That's very usual that they send communications together, okay, because a violation is linked to many rights, okay, or many mandates. So, for example, there is allegations of the evictions of indigenous peoples from their ancestral land in Indonesia, due to the fact that the land was given to a company. So there is a state company from Indonesia, and there is also a company from China that is involved. Okay, so the special rapporteurs, they have written to Indonesia, but also to China, and also to the state company in Indonesia, and also to the company in China. Okay, so they have so these letters or communications can be sent to states, but also to companies. Okay, and about one single violation, you can send about one case of violations. You can send information to the states, but also to companies. Okay. Another example is a letter they sent to about free trade agreements. Okay. What's the thing? Just a minute. Voilà. Okay, so they sent and there it's only food. You can see it's only the special on the right food who sent this communication to the European Union on the fact that the free trade agreements with Indonesia will have a negative impact on the right to food and the right to seats, because of the fact that the EU is asking Indonesia to become member to the UPF agreement, the International Union for the Protection of New Varieties of Plants, that increase the property rights of breeders, and it can have negative impacts on the right to seats of peasants in Indonesia and on the right to food. So the special rapporteur sent a letter to the European Union and to Indonesia. Okay. I have an example of a kind of letter that I found, the one that he sent to, it's the same topic. He sent it to Norway on the free trade agreements between the EFTA, it's Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland together with Thailand and Malaysia. Okay. And it's the same, because these countries, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland, they are pushing Thailand and Malaysia to become a member to UPF. Okay, so he said, according to the information I have received, etc. He's giving the information received from the NGOs, and then he's asking questions. Okay, so you please provide information that you have on the situation, indicate the position of EFTA on the seat systems in the countries in your partner countries, etc. Okay, so that's how it works. And then in the website you also have the responses of the government. One very interesting, because the most of the governments, they would just say, no, we stick to our position. For us, the property rights are important. But Indonesia wrote back to Special Rapporteur on the right to food for the letter that he sent about the EU agreement. Okay, and it says that Indonesia is not party to UPF. Yeah? And Indonesia considers that it is inappropriate, to become member, because they want to protect, they want to keep a balance between the rights of farmers and breeders in the country. Okay, so Indonesia maintains its position not to accede to the UPF 91 in order to ensure policy space to protect smallholder farmers, etc. Okay, so that's a very strong statement, and it's a public document. Okay, it's on the website of the Special Rapporteur on the right to food. So that's something you can use as advocacy also in Europe and in other countries. Okay, so now if we go back to I will end with that. If we go back to the mandate, you can see that the Special Rapporteur, they also on the right food, they also do press release. Okay, and they also issue statements. Okay. For example, there was a statement a few weeks ago about the right to food and other human rights in Palestine that was signed in Gaza, signed by Municipal Chapter. That's a statement. It's a public statement that they can do with other mandates on a specific situations. Okay. That's also something on which you can collaborate. And the last thing that the working group, let's say, is doing is to collaborate now with UN agencies. And for example, we have invited Geneviève to participate in a side event we organized at the CFS, Committee on World Food Security, in October, to speak about the right to food and also the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. I mean, it's the same week of the working group meeting, so it will not be possible, but we will see if we can do it online. But anyway, there is a collaboration with UN agencies, FAO, for example, but also the Committee on World Food Security, that also is very important in the work of the working group and the Right to Food Special Rapporteur, and that can also help the work of civil society organizations in this fora. Voilà. I'll stop now and give the floor to Geneviève.
Christophe, there are a number of questions directly.
Okay.
So
Okay.
please, could you have a look at them?
Yes,
and if
I
you
will
can
do it
respond
in the
to
chat.
them, fine. Okay. So please, Geneviève, the floor is yours. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Bonjour.
Hello, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I hope you can hear me well. I'm going to do my presentation in French. We'll start by giving a few information about myself. I am Geneviève Savigny. I have been a peasant all my life, and I have now retired a few months ago. Since the resolution 54/9 was accepted, the working group was set up in order to implement the UNDROP. So a working group has been created with representatives from the 5 main regions of the UN. Via Campesina wished to have representatives from peasants themselves because the entire UNDROP process was supported by peasants and other people working in rural areas. So we said we wanted to take part in this mandate. At the end of the day, I am the only peasant in this working group, but we are 5 members of this working group, 5 members that represent a rather interesting panel of let's say, of the people who support peasant rights. So as you can see on the list, the website, we are 2 people are lawyers. David, who comes from Armenia, and Uche, who comes from Africa, is also a lawyer in the US. A person who is very experienced in NGOs, in development and rural and peasant development, with Shalmali, who's from India. And we also have a person who's an anthropology professor called Carlo, and he comes from Colombia. So we have, I think, a working group that is balanced. It is also interesting to say that we are not alone in our work because we are usually supported by 3 people in the Secretariat. Today, the UN have funding issues, and particularly regarding human rights. So we currently only have 1 person who works part-time only for us to support us. That is Stefano Stensi, who is here with us today. He can maybe add information to what I will explain maybe later, but he is here with us today and he supports our group with his work. We are a new group. We don't have all the experience that Christophe has explained. It is a very rich experience for myself because I'm very attentive to what Christophe has just said in order to try and see how we can enrich our work as well. You heard about all that was suggested. So there is a basic functioning principle, which is the special process mandates, that is sessions from our working group, 3 sessions per year, country visits, so theoretically 2 visits of a maximum of 2 weeks, and then we have the opportunity to take part in other activities depending on what is physically possible for us to organize and to take part in, depending on what is possible to set up as well during the next few months. So far, we've only had online sessions, so we didn't have a chance to meet physically as a group, but it will be the case at the end of October. We will present a first report to the Human Rights Council, and later on in October, we will present the same to the UN General Assembly to present rather our way of seeing the job itself, our projects as well, because we cannot already report on our activities that will come later. As part of this report, we explain our vision that reminds how the situation for peasants is difficult, including related to the food issue and the issue of hunger and poverty. This was the starting point of the work around UNDROP. This was related to the right to food in rural areas. As part of our vision of the mandate, we wish to reach a large support for this declaration and for peasant rights, and a never-increasing support from countries. There is a certain countries that are still opposed to it, but you can see that the number of countries that support the declaration is always increasing. So we hope that the countries will understand the interest of defending peasants and peasant agriculture for social reasons, for food reasons, and for food quality reasons as well as for environmental reasons during this era of biodiversity and climate crisis. This is important to make sure that countries understand this. We also hope a vast support from the people concerned, that is peasants themselves, as well as other people who are concerned by the declaration. Fisher folks, pastors, all small-scale producers who must keep on adopting this declaration as a tool for their own use as legal entities, as well as, of course, all NGOs, civil society organizations that support them as well. We would also like to be known and renowned as part of the processes that are linked to agriculture, whether at national level, with the issue of new laws regarding agriculture, seeds as well, lands as well, processes that can also be across several countries in the EU as well as international in some treaties or conventions, as will be discussed in COP16 around the issue of biodiversity. And this has an impact, of course, on peasants. And we wish to have a vast knowledge of that declaration within those processes, as well as support, at least an understanding of the importance of defending peasant rights, as well as all other people working in rural areas. There are, of course, mentions of a set of particular situations, such as the situation of women, that is particularly important, as well as the importance of rights violations around the issue of land, for example, that is particularly important. Regarding the reports we have to publish, thank you, Christophe, for showing all the reports that you have published so far. Now it looks even bigger. The work we have to do looks even bigger as I thought, but we're going to take one after the other. And so to produce those reports, after this first general presentation report, we will start consulting over the next few weeks. It will be in September. We will start with consultations with countries in order to know how UNDROP is being implemented, how peasant rights are being implemented, and how can we better implement them in various situations with propositions as to priorities. So this consultation will take place among countries as well as right holders, so the people concerned, in order to make sure our work is as fast as possible and try and find out what reports are the most interesting so far. I can already see what challenges we will have. How can we add value to what's already existing in other processes? That is among right to food, for example, or special processes related to specific countries. How can we better have a certain impact on the realities of the situations? This will also be a challenge to try and use as best as possible the existing reports and try and focus in a clever way. So we will also start setting up a list of countries countries to visit. So to visit a country, you need to be invited, but to be invited by that country, we have to ask them to invite us, basically. So we made a list of countries that seem interesting to us, according to a list of criteria in terms of accessibility or else, and that also represent a set of challenges. So we will send them a letter to try and be invited, and then we will try and visit them by the end of the year if possible, or if we had maybe to wait until 2025, where there should be two visits that should take place. So we will try maybe to have one visit in 2024 already. As part of the mandate, there is an importance given to the distribution of the UNDROP and of the work of our working group. So to us, it would be important to think in terms of translation. How can we have that text translated into more local languages? Because it is important to reach the people concerned. We take part also in a series of events that are organized by other partners. As today is the case, actually, I thank very much the Geneva Academy, as well as Fastenaktion, sorry, I can't pronounce as well. And thank you for inviting us today again, because this is part of our work of distributing our work as well, of sharing in order to make sure people are more aware of our working group and have feedback as well on what we can do. We also are planning to organize events. We're going to try and better react to all the requests that we receive in order to present better the declaration and our working group in different spaces. We will also try and think about how we can ourselves organize events and how we can maybe share in spaces that are maybe a bit not so easy to access, such as I mentioned all those processes that are linked to agriculture in the rural world. Some of those spaces are dominated maybe by the commercial world, let's say, with the business world, business entities. In those processes, we haven't had interaction. We haven't been able to present anything so far. So we're going to try and think about how they could maybe invite us, how we can interact in order to make them aware of the existence of this declaration and the need to respect peasant rights. General. Regarding communications, we are now trying and understand how vast the task is in terms of communications, because we can see that the cases of right violations are extremely numerous. We have already received a few requests. So one of the special rapporteurs, maybe sorry, I forgot to mention this fact. So during our first group meeting, I was designated as a chair of this working group as an acknowledgement of the importance of the work of peasants in this process. So I'm kind of a symbol to suspect, and a symbol of how peasants themselves were the working force and managed to have this declaration accepted in a rather peculiar process. We also have two vice chair. One of them was Uche, and who will be more in charge of communications. She will try and deal with requests and try and think about how we can better meet those requests and try and have an impact on the situation of the people who will get in touch with us, or the organizations that will get in touch with us to interact with either countries or with organizations or maybe private companies. So opportunities now, to be honest, I'm impressed by all the possibilities that this working group will give us. As a reminder, I took part in setting up the UNDROP from the setting up of the very first working groups in 2013 in order to try and bring in the European vision in those discussions until 2018, so until the declaration was approved. We can clearly see how this process allows us to better interact with governments, to make sure peasants are recognized as acknowledged as right holders. And so we can say that thanks to the declaration, we exist and we must be respected. And our working and living conditions must be taken care of in order to make sure that peasants can exist and produce in the best conditions possible in an environment that is not always easy and can be difficult in terms, can be hostile in terms of, for example, all the environmental issues and the extreme climate events, the ever stronger agribusiness, as well as countries that are rather attracted by a development model that is based on huge projects rather than on strengthening local communities. So we have strong challenge. So we have this possibility to interact, and we need to use that possibility as much as possible. This is really important to us. In terms of challenges, we'll also have the issue of access to the people concerned. So the people we're talking about, of course, live in rural areas, so they are not necessarily well connected to networks, so such as internet access, or even also possibilities to travel, to come to meetings. So to us, it will really be important to use all the means possible to make this interaction as easy as possible and to make sure that we can know as much as possible what is taking place and what we can do. And we, of course, know that we will be facing oppositions. We know that the very existence of the peasant world is not to everybody's taste, but we hope that we will manage to make sure the importance of this community today will be acknowledged, and that the states themselves will be in a better position to support laws regarding peasant rights. I think I tried to explain generally our vision. I can maybe add information to any element that I've mentioned too quickly. Maybe a last word about communication. So we have that page, that web page, that page that is rather brief so far, but we will try and add information and complement that page. So we will also soon have a Twitter account for our group, and we will start using that account to communicate and release press releases that we will publish along the way. But we first, of course, need to set up everything.
Mm-hmm. So, Geneviève, will you stop here? Or would you like
for first presentation?
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that was very enriching, and I mean also to listen to you and to get, you know, to hear about the vision of the group and how you look at it. We all know the group has just started, so there is no experience yet from the group in doing country visits and so on. The group first had to, or has to, form itself. There are 5 people from different corners of the world, which can also be very challenging. So I've seen some questions in the chat about already existing experiences, and I think that's also why we had the first presentation of Christophe talking about the special rapporteur on the right to food, to show what you could do with a special procedure. So I think the working group, first it's a working group, but then also like it's building up its work. But thank you very much. I've seen there is a number of questions in the chat. And I suggest that we quickly go through those questions or comments before people start asking other questions or raise the hand. We thought about having the possibility of putting up your hand and then talk. But I think as we are so many people, so if you would like to talk, then please write in the chat that you would like to to speak up in the floor and bring your question on the floor. Otherwise, we now for the questions that are already in the chat, we're gonna read them, and then we see to whom they are directed. There were some questions to Christophe. He has already responded to some, but as far as I see, and maybe I need the help of my colleague Krista, there's some of them who haven't been responded yet, and there is quite a number of questions we have already in the chat that are directed to Geneviève. So I have a question, and please correct me or let us know if we miss someone's question. It is, let me see, the first one was, in a session. What is this? The question about the list of countries. I think that was a question from Christian about the list of countries. I'm not sure whether this has been responded to.
Yeah, I can, maybe I can tell you to whom, to which question I responded.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, I did send now the list of questions of countries that have accepted the International Treaty on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. But of course, you know that you have to know that it's like all countries now accept the right food in the resolutions of the Council or the General Assembly. But it is true that 170 countries have accepted this treaty, and so they have to report every 5 years in Geneva, and you can do reports as NGOs. I have also there was a question if the civil society organizations can propose visits of countries to the working group. I mean, you can always. I have sent the email of the working group, and then there was the question about can a state refuse a country visit? Yes. There is more than 100 countries that have made a declaration in which they say that they accept all the special procedures in their country. So in that case, it's you have to negotiate the dates, and it can still be a lengthy process, depending on the will of the state. But for this country, it's more easy. But for the other ones, yes, you have to negotiate, and yes, they can refuse. Our special on right food, for example, we couldn't go to North Korea, we couldn't go to Myanmar. Yeah, so that's two examples in which we could never go despite asking. And when we go to India, we had to wait more than 1 year and a half, a change of government so that they let us in. So well, that can happen. Then there was a question about if there is a report on migrant workers or migrant peasants. So there was a report of the Special Right Food on agricultural workers. I will send you the links in the chat. I think that's what I did. Thanks.
Okay.
Est-ce que
Thank you. There is also a question, also I think still linked to Christophe's presentation from Patricia from Brotherly Delen, says, can you also file a complaint about legislation not at country level but at international level, specifically with regards to the EU legislation on seeds? I think
Yes,
that one is directed to you.
Stefano responded. Stefano is working at the office of the Commission.
Oh, okay, fine.
The working group. He said, yes, you can send a communication on the EU.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and then there was a question at the end from by Simon on the links between the Declaration of Rights of Peasants and the work on the treaty. And so I can maybe share just a minute. So we published with the three former special rapporteurs on the right to food. We published something on the links between UNDROP and the treaty, the IFAO treaty, on seeds. Sorry, it's a bit, and so that's not a good one. anyway, so we submitted this one. So we did a publication on the, and it is in, I will send you the link, okay? But it is in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and English. And so that's a publication on the implementation of the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Culture in light of the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants, okay? And I published it with Olivier de Scoter, Ilya Lelver, and Professor Michael Fakri, so the current Special Rapporteur on the Right Food and the two former Special Rapporteur. And that's, so it was presented in New Delhi a few years ago when there was this discussion at the treaty by the member states of the treaty, and it's after this meeting that they decided to make link with human rights bodies. Okay, so there is two resolutions passed at this moment when they say that they want to make links with the human rights bodies, and so yes, there is a very strong argument for the working group to try to and so of course the Secretary on the Right Food also to work with the treaty, but then it's a question of maybe to Geneviève now if it's a priority or not of the working group, and if you will include that in your work.
Yes, in order to complete, yes, of course, this is part of our mandate and the other procedures, and also to work linked with other treaty body organizations in order to mutually reinforce ourselves. And it is important to be able to create and maintain all these bridges in order to maintain the most hard rights in the real rights of peasants. As far as the declaration is a tool, which is not a constraining tool, a mandatory tool, a binding tool, for countries, but we must also reinforce more binding rights and make sure they are implemented. This is also about the reinforcement of all of these rights, which are important to us in order to obtain the most important concrete results. And for instance, we've already started organizing meetings with the Special Rapporteur on human rights and climate change, because there is a true issue at stake about which solution we're going to bring to climate change. Will we have a very technological solutions at the risk of seeing some indigenous communities and peasants expelled from their land in order to compensate loss and in order to enter a carbon market? Or will we enter this situation of creation of carbon markets, which may result in the eviction of indigenous communities and peasants? Or will we develop agroecology everywhere and better think about carbon regeneration via the use of agroecology? So these are agricultural policies that will implement all of these rights, the rights to a healthy environment and the rights of peasants to work. So it is this articulation and this reinforcement of rights and rules that we wish to implement through processes and rules and concrete regulations that have the greater impact on the ground. And so I think that within these circumstances, the articulation with NGOs and all people who have technical work, and this articulation is going to be very important in order to mutually reinforce these various spaces. And so political organization as organizations that accompany people from the European level, and the recognition of land is that people do not know human rights enough. So in order to create the steps, bridges between the various universities, essential in order to strengthen the right to exist of people on the ground. This is a part of what we see through our mandate, that is the work of partnership with the treaty bodies. I apologize, I'm confusing languages. And this in order to work with them and other special procedures, including special procedures that have to do with countries. We currently have some interrogations in regards to the right of Palestine, where the rights of peasants are being violated constantly in terms of access to land, destruction of their tools, work tools, this life destruction. But we're also constantly trying to see what is the most relevant tool and what that will bring a resolution, political resolution, in the context of a conflict of which you all know the complexity of. And so there is a question about whether the working group has identified key themes, for instance, access to land, seeds, health, pesticides, agrochemicals. Yes, I hope not to forget any. So yes, land, the question of right to land, women's rights, the question of, I'm sorry, I am going blank. Everything is important and everything is a priority. The question of representation, the fact that we and so that the fact that all peasants and every other person working in rural area may adequately represented in the various instances that deal with their rights. Seeds, obviously, because there is always a great emergency in regards to rules and technologies that advance. And then it has to do with the complete implementation of fundamental rights. And also to take into account, I'm sorry, this is something that I know less of. And they have to do with the integration of peasants in international institutions, financial institutions, the financing of development. And the question of development. And this will be part of our work, but this is something we can discuss later.
Mm-hmm. Do you have other questions?
Yes, I was wondering, did we miss someone in the chat list? I see something. There was one question. I'm not sure whether that was now already fully answered. There was a question about the criteria. We have concrete criteria how you choose a country. That could be either, Christophe, based on your experience on to work with a special rapporteur right to food, for example, if you had criteria, which countries you would choose. But also for Geneviève, maybe you have some already information, maybe you had sharings among your group, how you would,
Okay.
what would be your criteria?
So for the experience of the first special rapporteur on right to food, so we knew we would do like something like 2 missions per year. So so that's very limited. Okay. So for example, the treaty bodies, they examine a lot more states in a few years, because they examine per year maybe 10 to 15 countries per year. But the very important difference is that the committee, the treaty bodies, they examine the situation in Geneva. They only have a discussion in Geneva for 1 day with the state and the NGOs. While the special rapporteur, they can go in country for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So it's very different, okay? So you do only 2 countries per year, but the impact you can have maybe is bigger. So we wanted to have countries that were different so that we can, you know, the analysis we made could be useful in other countries of similar. So the first mission was to Niger. It's the poorest country, it was at that time. And with a famine in 2005, also when we came back. We then went to Brazil of the huge power, lots of resources, huge inequalities, very vibrant civil society. Then we went to Bangladesh, where you have natural catastrophes. You had the question of the share of the river with India. And then we went to Ethiopia, where as I said, the main question was food aid, and then we went to Palestine when it was the occupation, armed conflict. That was the main problem. So we tried to go to different countries, and at the end, I must say, the last two missions were in countries where we thought we could have a discussion, a collaboration with the government, and so that was Bolivia. In 2007, I said with Evo Morales was the president, and it was a very good collaboration we had. And then we went to Cuba, who was, on terms of right food, I mean, it was clear that it was one of the first countries to reach the MDGs at that time. So that was 2 countries with who we wanted to collaborate. So that was what the special rapporteur decided at the end. But at the beginning, we thought, it would be good to go to diverse countries to try to have lessons learned that could be useful for other countries that are similar. Thanks. Geneviève, maybe you can say where you think you could go.
Yes, we started. So we started a list among the working group. We discussed about our regions. We tried and think which countries could add and share good examples of good practices, because in order to try and for people to understand how interesting this declaration is, we want to share good practices in order to show how positive they can be for the peasant world. So we made a list of countries that can be good examples in that matter. For example, a seed legislation that would protect local seeds. So this was, for example, a criterion of doability as well, because we are beginners group actually. So for us, it seems easier for us to go to a country that is rather small instead of going straight away to China or India, huge countries. We also think that certain countries are rather typical of some issues. We would like to have, for example, to have a case in the EU, as well as a case in Europe outside of the EU that has a rather vast peasant population, the density of the peasant world, and the importance of agriculture in that country is obviously a criterion as well. The fact that there is no office of the Human Rights Council in the country or in the region in order to facilitate the organization is also a criterion. We also wonder if those countries are often visited or not. Some countries are often requested for visits, and other have never been visited. So this is also a criterion we've added to our list, with 3 or 4 countries by region. Per region. And those countries will be contacted very soon. But we are still open. If partners would say that there is an interesting example in such or such country, it is something we can take into account, of course, still. And our mandate will last 6 years. Well, actually 3 years and then another 3 years. So we're just starting and we're open to any suggestion in terms of issues, in terms of priorities, in terms of countries. But we have in mind that we want to be positive. We want to be first positive in order to show that it is possible, that it is interesting for countries to defend peasant rights. So we have that in mind first, in order, instead of going straight away to maybe cases of right violations. Of course, we will work on those cases, but not only.
Okay, there were a few questions for me, I think, in the chat. Sorry. So the first was about the impact of the missions. It was Lungi. So there are I think at least 2 countries in which we did a vision mission. There was lots of impact. It was Brazil and in India. Why? Because the civil society was very strong in the 2 countries. Okay, so that was it's always easier if the special rapporteur is supporting the civil society in the country, or progressive. It can be the government that is progressive, like in Bolivia in 2007. But it's always more easy to support a body or entity that is progressive, because you only come for 2 or 3 weeks and you will not come back. You can always, after 1 year, send a questionnaire to the government to see how the recommendations were implemented, all these kind of things. But the truth is that you will come once, and so you have to find allies. So in India and Brazil, it was very important allies. And as I said, we were in 2002 there, and Lula started in the 1st of January 2003. And so his main objective was to reduce hunger in the country. He also supported peasant agriculture in the country through the creation of a new ministry, etc., etc. So there was yes, the mission had an impact. And in India, it was supporting the Right Food campaign. That I mean, the case in the Supreme Court of India had a huge impact on hundreds of millions of people, of children that now have school meals that they didn't have 20 years ago. But in other countries, we had sometimes no effect, So when, for example, Bangladesh, I couldn't see an impact we had. It's when it is difficult to identify partners in the country and that will do the follow-up, that will continue to do the work, and that's very difficult. So it depends. What is also important, and Geneviève just told it, is that you also have to see the positive things that are done in the country, okay? So when you ask for a country visit, you will always say, I want to visit the good things, see the good things you are doing. And also, of course, I will see civil society, and if there are violations, I will say it. But you can never ask just to see the violations. And once, I think Olivier tried to go to Colombia, and he said, I just want to go to the area where there is a palm oil, and I want to study the impact of the palm oil on the right food. And they said, no, you cannot come. So you have to also say, I want to see the positive things that Gwen is doing, and then I will can, of course, you have part of the visit with the civil society, if there are violations. And then there was a question by Judith on the economic and solidarity economy, social and solidarity economy. Yes, there is a resolution that was passed at the General Assembly, very important resolutions. And yes, we discussed it now, Judith, but yes, it will be very important to make a link between this resolution of the UN and the rights of peasants. There is lots of in common in that fight. There was a question about by Philippe on the what can we do if the special rapporteur doesn't, or the working group is not very quick in responding to urgent appeals. So I guess you can continue to write to them. You can also go public, I guess, saying we wrote a letter, we sent information to the experts, but we don't have any reaction. I don't know. And then there was a question by Uli on the free prior informed consent, if it will be a priority of the working group, or so it's for you, Geneviève. Just an information in the declaration, it's we didn't manage to have free prior informed consent. It was in the draft declaration, but it was not accepted by states. So what we have is consultation in good faith. Okay, but that's still very important. But that it is consultation in good faith that is used in the context of the declaration, not the free prior informed consent. But is it important, Geneviève, for you, this?
Yes, I believe what's going to be very important is how the countries will support and welcome the big projects. And this also relates to the issue of information and the issue of representation of the various categories of peasants. And yes, what will be taken, everything that concerns that about taking into account the existence of peasants and other people working in rural areas is very important, of course, yes. Because in our countries, for example, in Europe and the global north, there is a certain right to small-scale peasants related to projects that are being set up with a series of processes that do not exist apparently in other situations where small-scale farmers are not taken into account or cannot raise their voice. So of course it is a very important element. Regarding solidarity economy, firstly, I would like to have the link to that resolution in order to see what's already been said. But I also think it is a positive tool that everything that is linked to short circuit, direct sales to local producers, all of those are tools that can be used to develop peasant agriculture and small-scale producers. So those are tools that are interesting, of course, and the law is sometimes positive, sometimes negative. So yes, indeed, I believe it is an important tool. There are links, of course, and we would be very happy to have more information and know how we can better value what's already existing and see how these can be addressed in any way or another. Sorry, Geneviève. Yes. Yes, maybe something regarding the question about countries. When we thought about the various countries, we realized that we have very little information about all African countries that are very different from one another, but where the situation is also interesting, of course. There is a need for us maybe to know the basics about what is taking place in agricultural terms in various countries, who represents peasants, how many peasants are there, etc. All those basic information are sometimes very important in order to meet requests. So, for example, I know myself quite a lot about Europe, but there are 192, 193 countries in the world. And it is very important to have information about the existing systems in other countries around the question of food production, peasants, etc. I am saying this because I know that there must be quite a few NGOs here in the meeting today, so we need all this information. We'll see then how we can make use of it. So another question comes from Uli Beck from CAFAD.
In English, what about links to regional human rights instruments? For example, the Escazú agreement and the Inter-American system, probably the Inter-American Court.
Yeah.
Okay, I will answer quickly. Yes, it is a part of the links that we need to create with other instruments, human rights instruments. I think my colleagues who are lawyers will work more than I will regarding this issue. particularly. So I'm waiting for our working sessions at the end of October as well to try and set up a strategy for us to work with. So I've presented the vision and a few priorities, but we will also have a working plan that will include our work, what work we do between the sessions, and the relations we have to build with other processes. Because in terms of partnership, we're also meant to work with other treaty bodies, including the FAO, particularly regarding the issue of food. So yes, we will work with them. How, I cannot know for now. I also have one question. Sometimes when we talk to our partners, our colleagues from the Global South, I was often asked how, or is it possible to contact directly the members of the regional group, depending on the region where the people are? For example, Carlos in Latin America, or I don't know, somebody else, or yourself, Geneviève, in Europe. Or does it always have to go through your central email address, or how does it work? Particularly if we want, for example, to invite you to a awareness raising session, such as a presentation like the one we're having today. How does it work? Do you already have experience with it? Yes, we have decided so far it is possible to contact the person in your region. Our rule internally is to share this with all the other members, depending on the difficulty level. Sometimes you don't need to wait for an agreement, but we share this invitation. Say, yes, so here is this invitation. What do you think about it? Yes or no? Usually there is no opposition to it. And then we try and give feedback as well to the other members in order to make sure that everybody profits from that participation. So we have that UN.org address. We are starting to use it a little bit. If you're writing to that address, then it will be stored. Then we know that it is also managed by our secretariat, but we are also independent enough to be able to work as well on our side. So it is also always possible to write to one single person, maybe CC the general address in your email. So then everybody, then there is some follow-up can take place in Geneva, and while also being in direct contact with the person you want to target. And maybe we will have too many requests later. We don't know. Maybe we'll have to prioritize, but for now, this is what we've decided to do. And that's it. Okay. There is also a question, still another question. Question by David Paredes. Hello, could you please share the email that you've mentioned?
Good morning. Could you share the general email address?
I think the question is to you, Geneviève. Which email?
David, puedes...
It's on the website. I will show it.
Okay. I'll
Sorry.
Oui, voilà, c'est le...
So on the working group page, it says contact information.
Mais concrètement,
it's always good to maybe write to this, the address you can see here, the general address, and also write directly to the person you want to contact directly. So using CCs in your email. We are setting up our work so far. Our secretariat does not have as many people as it should. So we try to work as well as we can in order to have all information and requests. So please do not hesitate to use the various systems.
Hello. My colleagues, did we miss any questions or comments in the chat? Or if you posted a comment or a question and we missed you, maybe you can post it again.
As far as I'm concerned, I have a preliminary question. I know there are a number of NGOs that are here in the room, and in our consultation, the consultation that will be launched next week, we'll speak with the stakeholders, the rights holders, and our concern is to have a list of the people whom we need to exchange with and contact. Therefore, we already have a preliminary list, but please do not hesitate that for participants to say we know this or that country, this or that organization, and to help us complete our organization and our knowledge of who we ought to exchange with, and to mention the people we need to speak with, and this will allow us to better understand. I know that a number of people, when they register, help us to say, do we have an organization? We do this or that, and we represent producers. This will help us feel our database and information about the landscape of representatives with whom we must speak, with peasants, pastoralists. It's very wide a universe. And we are, of course, already discussing with Via Campesina, and we are also already in touch with the FIAN or CETIM, but we do not know everything. And it is important to that we all contribute in gathering knowledge. This is extremely important so that we don't lose information.
I see we have another question from Matthias Saladin, SCAT Foundation, Switzerland.
Yes, I can respond maybe. It's a question about the consistency. No, I will say it. It's about the consistency of the Swiss foreign policy. So on UNDROP, so it's true that Switzerland, it's a bit long story, but in 2012, Switzerland was against the declaration. They said at the council, we don't need a declaration. Then we made a huge campaign in Switzerland with peasant organizations, and the national parliament asked the government to support the declaration negotiation. Decision of the government in 2013 to support the negotiation, and so between 2013 and 2018, Switzerland has been very supportive. They have organized even meetings, and they have voted in favor of the declaration in Geneva and in New York in 2018. And so they didn't have to vote in 2023 on the working group because they were not part of the council. But they didn't support, let's say, because if you are non-member, you can support. They didn't want to support. So we don't know exactly their current position, but the fact is that, yes, on the right to seats and intellectual property rights, yeah, they have a quite negative influence on other states, and we do things with them. If you can write to me directly if you want. We have done many activities, publications, and even events with the government on that question, and we try to change this policy, but it's a bit difficult. We can still use the fact that they have voted in favor of the declaration in 2018 in our advocacy work.
Yeah, thank you. Geneviève, would you also like to say something about when exactly the group is going to present their first report in Geneva? Because some of the organizations present here at this meeting will perhaps be in Geneva during that week. And the same maybe also to Christophe about the side event that we are planning the day after.
Alors, as far as the presentation of the report, it will take place on September 18th at the end of the afternoon. And probably followed by comments the next day. And the presentation in New York will already be on October 16th. So I'd like to clarify that I will be present in Geneva from Monday 16th to the 19th included.
Okay. And for the side event, we always try to organize a side event when there is a presentation of such a report. So with Flavia Campesina, Setima, and others, there is a side event organized on the 19th on the rights of peasants and the right to development, because there is also the special rapporteur on the right to development who is presenting his report. So that's a side event about that. I have sent the link to the website Defending Peasants' Rights. It's in English, French, and Spanish, and you will have all the information about the side event and everything that will be done.
Yes, thank you very much. I see there is a new question from Alice from Malawi. I read it. What are the role of the working group, or what is the role of the working group? Because in the rural areas, we still have people still particularly vulnerable to discrimination and to wide range of human rights abuse, including inadequate access to land, adequate food resources, as well as facing threats to their livelihood from climate change and land grabbing. What are the benefits of the working group to the rural women? So I think it's especially also the question is, what will be, how will you include the focus of women, of rural women, rural indigenous women, or rural peasant women in the work?
This is absolutely a priority of the group, and in our report, there is a whole chapter on this matter in order to focus on the specific discrimination and the access and access to food, and the role as to what we can bring to this discussion. So depending on countries, it will be through country visits, it will be through communications that we may be able to address these issues, or through reports. Alix Cacher, I'll ask you the question. How can we get in touch with people? How can we start by explaining the existence of such rights? As far as the situation is concerned, is it now time to ask for a new law? Are there specific cases in terms of access to land that are not yet available for women? Are there women's groups that exist and that may need support? The group may do something, we can do something, but this will depend on what the local situation is and at which point we may be able to intervene. For instance, I imagine that in a country where there may be a struggle against a country, we may be able to support through a letter and demand a communication, organize this communication. If there is the implementation of a law, we may be able to contribute to it by reading to see if it corresponds to UNDROP. We may also do a press release, and we must see what the entry point is relevant depending on the local situation. While recognizing the general situation, which is difficult in a number of countries, and what is the specific difficulty in order to discuss the subject.
Okay. I'm not sure. Christophe, do you see something in the chat that we missed?
No, I think it's okay. We can end.
Okay. So, but before wrapping up the entire morning session, I think this there were a lot of interesting questions, and there will certainly more points to be discussed in the working groups in the afternoon and even after the meeting. Alice, would you like to say something?
Okay. No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. So we will give some information just at the end of this session about the working groups. But before going to this part, more recessional part, my sincere thanks to Geneviève that you could make it today, that you took your time and explained us how you are going to work, and also, I mean, the interest of the working group to relate with civil society. So we got some ideas how we can relate with you. And we also think that like peasant organizations, networks, but also civil societies, organizations across the world, I think we can also assist the special procedure to provide you with information if we know exactly what kind of information is useful for you. And I think that's part of the work we're going to do this afternoon in groups. I also thank Christophe for his presentation and for answering all the questions, the very detailed questions. So yes, so for those of you who are gonna be here this afternoon, please, if you didn't fill in the link to the questionnaire about which working group we would like to join, please do it now. The link has been just posted again for those who came later. And for those who do not participate in the afternoon, but who would like to be on the participants list so that we can send you the recordings in the 3 languages, and that you have the addresses of the people who joined the meeting, please fill in your name, organization, or your contact details that we can reach you afterwards. So far, I think there were about 60 or 70 people who had put in their names. So we give you another 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes that you can fill it in. But then I see, so maybe you can start doing it if you didn't do it. And I would like to give the word to Ana Lucas from Manos Unidas. Emily, would you be able to unmute Ana Lucas? Because I can't do it.
Ana Lucas is now able to unmute their microphone. They just have to do it. Ana Lucas, ¿pueden abrir su micrófono para hablar? Ya, gracias.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for those presentations. I actually didn't mean to raise my hand. I didn't do it on purpose. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and I think that there was some
Gracias.
questions in the chat about the implementation in the countries, so that we can discuss this afternoon. I think that's exactly the aim of this afternoon, to work in the regions and to discuss particular cases and how to share the information with the working group. Thank you.
Okay. And then finally, for those who are with us in the afternoon, Natasha, could you please post how the people should rename themselves for the group, for allocating the people to the groups for the afternoon? So if you can already do that, if you have already chosen your group, could you please rename according to what Natasha will post in the chat. And I think I give a few minutes and then we would wrap up for the morning. Would be the last moment for an urgent question or a comment. Otherwise, I would like to thank everyone, apart from the presenters, of course, all the participants who came from across the world. We are a big number. And a special thanks again to our Latin American colleagues. I know they had to get up in the middle of the night to join this meeting, and we really appreciate that you participated.
So maybe if I can just add a word. So thank you for carrying this UNDROP, because it is really the result of a collective approach. And I have this feeling that I'm here because so many people are pushing. So thank you.
Thank you, Geneviève.
Thank you, Geneviève, so much for your participation.
Merci. And goodbye.
Okay.
Ciao, bye-bye.
So bye to those who leave us after this session.
And we use the same link for this afternoon. Yes, we use the same Zoom link.
Okay, we see Uli, you will report.
Yes, is it okay if I do it in Spanish?
Yes, we have translation again.
Okay.
And I would like to ask the other members of the group to add if I forget anything. May we share the screen where we wrote down the notes so that you can all see what we discussed? We were a small group because with the time difference meant that for our colleagues from Guatemala, it was only 2 or 3 in the morning. So we were quite a small group. And those who are based in Latin America that joined us were the colleagues from Guatemala. And we talked about how we could possibly collaborate with the working group. They said they are an organization with more than 60 peasant organizations in Guatemala working on water, seeds, ancestral knowledge, food sovereignty, seeds. They said they could provide information on the situation, on the context and the research they've carried out. If there are any requests from the working group on any specific topic, they also said they would be able to support in organizing an official or academic country visit. Then there's a person who has a project to disseminate UNDROP, and she said she could highlight the best practices in using and implementing UNDROP. RedSac also has an area of communication and teaching materials. They said they could support through these teaching materials. In the case of CAFOD, we can share the information with our co-parties in the region, and if there is a request for thematic reports, as we do with other special procedures, we could facilitate this also to organize visits and to communicate specific cases to the working group. And last but not least, if there's an interest in the parties and from the working group, we could maybe organize an online session to share best practices in Latin America. We've done this on other occasions with other special procedures. So on this first point, I don't know if anyone else from the group would like to add anything. Okay, so I'll move on to the second part, and if at the end anyone wants to add, then feel free to do so. So when it comes to the relevant themes in our region, we shared thoughts on a recent debate on consultations with indigenous peoples and peasants. And it seems like in the declaration, there's not too much clarity on consultations and informed consent. We also touched on land access and land tenure, also evictions, crime. In relation to seeds, we talked of biopiracy, seeds trade, and then the issue of GMO seeds. Then we moved to discuss free, prior, and informed consent, water access and water grabbing, legislation, monocrops of bananas and palm. There's a specific law apparently in Guatemala to protect biodiversity and ancestral knowledge. Then there's the issue of criminalization of human rights defenders, the Escazú agreement. In this case, we agreed on these topics that we identified, and we agreed that all of these topics are very relevant to many of the countries on the continent. We also touched on the green funds for indigenous peoples and peasants, and how they are not really useful for peasants. We talked about the peasants from the Amazons. They are made invisibilized, and they focus on other population in the Amazon. We talked about peasant women. There's a whole world around that, and the issue of peasant human rights defenders. And then we shared some final thoughts on the green transition and the energy transition. And we talked about the lack of awareness on the impact of this and what happens to peasants that live on lands where minerals are extracted to build batteries for electric vehicles. There we agreed that we needed more information and more awareness rising. I'll move on to the third part. Maybe someone would then like to add. In relation to networking, we said it was important to coordinate our efforts, and that sometimes it gives the impression that different UN organizations may enter into contradiction. We have UNDROP for peasants, and then we have FAO and Climate Smart Agriculture and RED+, the lack of harmonization. We also highlighted how important it is to work with grassroots movements, as RIDSAT do, working with indigenous peoples and peasant communities, and to strike alliances with universities, researchers, and local communities. We mentioned several regional organizations that RIDSAT belongs to: Maela, Colectivo Semillas, Coordinadora Centroamérica por Escazú. We also briefly mentioned COP16 and the issue of biodiversity, and REDSAG will be participating. And they also shared a positive experience that may be an example, and that is doing advocacy work with the UN Rapporteur on Indigenous Peoples to write a thematic report on native seeds, indigenous and peasant identity. And then we also said that in Latin America, there's a wealth of experience in sharing the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants with local communities, and that these best practices could be shared and replicated in the case of UNDROP. And we mentioned that COP16 could be a specific space to mention UNDROP. We also highlighted the importance of having spaces for the CIDSE network members to coordinate, in COP16, there are several co-parties. I would leave it at that. But before, I'd like to ask Leonardo or David or any other member of our group to add anything or amend anything that I said. If you want to take the floor, please remember to raise your hand so that we can turn on your mics.
David?
David, would you like to speak? Yes, thank you. Thank you. I was having trouble turning on my mic. I think the summary was great. It gathers all of the main ideas we discussed. I think that in Abya Yala, as we call the continent, in Latin America, we share many similar realities in the different countries when referring to the peasant movement. We have held meetings where we've discussed many of these topics, and I think there are many similarities. And I believe that when answering the questions, I think there are high expectations with regards to UNDROP and how it can be implemented at a country level. We also have high expectations from the working group. I think we need to delve deeper in looking at how UNDROP is progressing or how its implementation is being progressing. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Because of time, I would like to go to the next group. The next group is the African group. I think there was only one African group and not a Francophone African group. So we start with the, or do you have something?
Francophone Africa, did you hold the group? If so, please speak. Yvonne, you have the floor. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? So let me introduce myself. My name is Yvonne Yumsi. I represent the network of actors of sustainable development in Cameroon. I think I was the only member of the the African Francophone group, because I was in the group and I was the only member there. So this group didn't do any work. So I'm not sure whether I should address and so should I introduce the situation in Cameroon or not? So 2 more hands are being raised. Is it in French for the same group or is it the next group?
So what happened was we, as the African group, we met. We had a few French-speaking colleagues who joined us, and we just decided to speak as a Pan-African group. So we incorporated some French speakers who said they could understand English, and we came up with the submission that's on the screen now as a group. I'm not sure what happened to our colleague. Maybe he got left out in some way, but we had French speakers who joined us and we spoke as one African group. Could I go ahead or maybe give opportunity to the previous speaker, maybe if, in case he has any contributions as Francophone? I could be guided.
Christophe, is it? Do you have an urgent question, Christophe, or can Namasik
Yes, just to
go on?
say that the case of Cameroon with Yvan, we discussed it in our group. So it will be in the summary of the group in Europe, what he said about Cameroon. So you can go ahead with the group in English for Africa.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We had Lungi, who was the chair of the group, and I took notes, and I'm representing the group today. So group members, in case there's anything that you'd like to add as I go along, please come through. So we did start with the first question around how can we engage the UNDROP working group? And what came out from our group, first of all, was rural people must be informed about the working group, because even within the discussions that we had quite a number of our sisters from and other colleagues were asking about what the working group is, what is their mandate. So one of the what we had identified as a group is there's a need for rural people to be informed about the working group, what their mandate is, capacity building rural people to understand better what the working group, the work of the working group. The other, what we identified also was there needs to be mapping of mappings of the consultations and the side engagements, the major events that are going to be done by the working group. This needs to be mapped so that it can then be informed, or rural people can be informed on when these side events and when the consultative meetings are going to happen. There was also a contribution on we need to have media engagement, both social and main media, with on targeted platforms and targeted messages that are clear for all consortium and agreed upon by all consortium members. There also needs to be, so the educating of rural people around the working group and its mandate will then be able to help local rural people reach out to their governments, and also to ensure that we follow up with the governments and their reporting to be inclusive of the issues that are related to rural people. There was, from the information dissemination, which was one of the major key issues that were raised, especially with the working group, there was a suggestion to have an information pack. So to package everything about the working group, who they are, what they do, what the mandate is, when the events, consultative meetings are going to happen, when the side events are going to be happening, so that everybody is fully informed. In addition to this, there was another suggestion around the same, where there will be need for an educational sensitization rollout to all rural people so that they can understand better. There was an issue also raised around the special rapporteurs that work within the working groups, how they can be brought together to strengthen their messages. There is need to make linkages and intersectionalities of the different parts of the working group, and understanding of how to use these different parts of the working group. Another point that came out is how to share the wealth of knowledge that is held by rural people, civil society organizations, because we identified in our group that there needs to be that reciprocity of information, where we are able to get information from the working group about what's happening, and we also For example, in the Rural Women's Assembly, the example that was given is there's so much work that has been done around the issues that relate to us as rural people. So how can we also then feed into sharing this information to the working group so that it can then be used to identify and possibly even address key issues that are faced by rural people? We also had a contribution, I think one of the last contributions that I managed to document was on the need for capacity building, again, around the working group. This was one of the main points that came out from the group, that there really is a serious need to capacity build the rural people, civil society organizations, NGOs around the work of the working group, so that it's easier for them to find how to then interact and link and push forward the agenda of the rural people. I hope I captured what was mentioned in the group. I don't know if my group members want to add on this. I don't see any hands through the chair. I don't know if anybody else has raised their hands and they want to contribute. Okay. All right. If there are no hands, and I've checked in the chat, I don't see anybody who's sent. I'll move on to the next question, which was how can we... Oh, sorry, I see the screen is scrolling. Okay. So the next question was around how best... Sorry, no, that was the next question. The next question was around what are some of the relevant topics in our region, that is Africa, our working group, that was our working group. And one of the first points that came out was around we need to push forward an agenda around the food systems that have the policies of seed and agriculture attached to them. I.e., we need to push forward the right to food and food sovereignty. That's one thing that we identified. Another topic that was picked or that was discussed was the land issue. The land issue was identified as being critical, as once the issue of seed and the issue of land is the example that was given was the issue that is ongoing in Kenya, where peasant farmers or rural people cannot share seed. And there's also an issue around land tenure. And evidently around Africa, this is something that is being infringed on. So the discussion was what needs to be pushed forward is farmers, rural people, peasants should have the right to share indigenous and local seed. And they should have access to land, because if they don't have access to land, if they don't have access to seed, then they don't have food. And it is easy to control the economy once you have rights to these. So as a group, we discussed that this needs to be pushed forward, the issue around land tenure and the right to share to indigenous seed, local seed. Okay. The other issue that was brought up that needs to be pushed forward as a topic is around climate change or the climate crisis. It was noted that quite a number of rural people, peasants, have experienced losses in livelihood due to the climate crisis, but have not been paid attention to or given any form of reparations for the loss that they experience in the climate crisis. With the climate crisis, where we have cyclones and the droughts, quite a number of people lose out, especially that most of the livelihood of a lot of rural people in Africa is around agriculture. And once this climate crisis hits, which is still ongoing even as we speak, quite a number of people have lost their livelihoods already, and there's still more to come. So reparations was brought up as an issue that needs to be pushed forward. Another topic that was picked was around the pesticides. We have the ongoing use of banned pesticides in Europe that are being allowed for use in Africa. So as a group, we discussed that we need to have this issue also tabled for rural peoples, because quite a large number of rural people in Africa are reliant on agriculture, and the use of banned pesticides is infringing on their health, as well as the food quality that is produced, because the use of these pesticides results in the production of food that is not good for health. Another issue that was raised, that was re-emphasized, was around food sovereignty and sustainable agriculture, as well as the use of smart technology to protect our environment. Another issue that was brought up was the issue around land, once again, that was re-emphasized, and ensuring that we make that linkage between UNDROP and UNDROP. Indigenous people and peasant people's rights should be pursued side by side, because they are linked together. And once again, something that was pushed forward, or an issue that was raised within the group, is again towards the criminalization of the indigenous seed. This is rampant in a lot of African countries, with policies that are being pushed forward to criminalize the use and the exchange of local and indigenous seed. So these were the points that came out from the group. I am not sure if there's any additions from my team on this one, as I move forward to the next question. Okay.
Sorry that I intervene, Namasiko. We
Yes,
have
please.
about 20 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
so can you be quick on the last point? I'm just fearing a bit that we may not have sufficient time for the two other groups, and I'm not quite sure how much time they will need.
Agreed. I think what I'll do is I'll just go through what's on the screen and not go into details of what was fully discussed. So we went to the next question: how can we do the networking and collaborate more closely in the group? So there was a suggestion that was brought up around creating a network or a consortium. We also talked about the distribution of information within the group. There was emphasis once again on the need for a two-way channel, that is communication coming from us to the working group and from the working group to ourselves. We also talked around media again, and we suggested issuing press statements, issuing newsletters, and other information or data around the working group. We also talked about networking and collaborations with other countries through exchange programs, skills sharing. We also talked about ensuring that we keep UNDROP on our agenda and on our programs, even as we continue to collaborate. We talked about how relevant it is to know the time when a country will be be aware of the role to play as civil society when the UNDROP working group is in your country, to mobilize minorities, rural women, and all peasants affected to be present when they come to that country, yes, and to also engage with Geneviève during the CFS 52 in Rome. Okay, we move due to time. I'm not sure if there's anything else that was discussed. I see that's where we ended. Okay, that's where we ended. I hope I've covered everything that was discussed by the group. I do remember that we also talked about networking with the representative of the African within the working group. I think that the person was identified, and seeing how we can push forward our issues. Thank you.
Namasiko, thank you so much for presenting that. I see you were really kind of working and having a lot of points to share with us. Very interesting points.
Indeed.
So, and just to give the other groups a chance to speak. Otherwise, I think it was really interesting what you mentioned from your group. Thank you. So we come to the working group on Asia. So the person who wants to present, please just put put up your hand and when we know. Okay, Philippe, I give.
Hello. Yes. Our discussion mostly focused on India and Nepal because those were the participants present. I will not go and repeat everything that was discussed. We did bring out some key issues, and it was interesting because quite clearly the right to land came out as one of the really the most important issues. And Nepal, next to the right to land, also the right to seats. Then there were other issues. So, for example, a bit of a discussion around the term peasant and the recognition in the legal framework. So, for example, in Nepal, the constitution talks about farmers. What does it mean if we have a peasant rights declaration? There can be some legal tensions with that. In India, there was the challenge that women are also often not recognized as farmers. Then we also talked a little bit about marketing and processing, which are also important, but it was quite clear in the discussion that actually the core struggles over the methods of production, land and seeds, are at the heart of the advocacy struggle. Then we also talked about what can UNDROP actually do to support local and national advocacies. And then a number of things came up. So, for example, it's useful for education and creating respect for, but also amongst peasants. It's useful to generate evidence and to build a critical mass. Actually, the critical mass is also very important to push for advocacies. And there it's key to have peasants actually themselves speak about the issues. UNDROP can be useful for dialogues also with local level governments. So, for example, sometimes there are misinterpretations of the legal framework. Again, an example from Nepal, where the land zoning practice is turning agricultural land increasingly into commercial land. And that actually collides with the constitutional right to food sovereignty. And UNDROP can be used to also clarify that misinterpretation. Now, it was not so clear in our discussion what to expect from the UN Working Group or what specifically to ask it, beyond asking it to holistically pick up peasants' rights concerns. And there's maybe a question to follow up on the one side, there are the general peasant rights advocacy efforts, which connect to a number and a plethora of issues. But at the same time, there are very specific issues. So how does the working group deal with that? So, for example, how does it engage with specific technical discussions in the plant treaty on peasant rights? Or how does it engage with discussions on land rights or any other of the very important core issues? And that may also be a big question of what resources does the working group actually have to properly follow up on all these different technical discussions that would be important to be followed up in a specific way. So the last one is more of a question maybe to follow up. Yeah, so if there's anything missing, group, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we move on to the next.
Okay, then the floor is Christophe, probably, who will present the findings or discussions from Europe. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just on the question by Philippe, it depends. The working group will decide how they will work, if they want to promote UNDROP in general or if they want to focus on specific thematics. So it really depends. I mean, for the first Chair-Rapporteur, Fakhri did very specific report on seeds, on trade, and yeah, that was his choice to do that and not to push the right foot in general, I would say. But the working group might choose other things. So in Europe, we decided, we discussed further that maybe there is an interest to create a coalition of the Friends of the Declaration in Europe, like it exists in Switzerland and in Luxembourg. That could allow us to do, for example, studies together on the implementation of UNDROP in European national laws and policies and in European foreign policy, for example, in relation to trade, intellectual rights. It would also allow us to lobby for important topics in which decisions are made at the EU level, such as seeds and land and the common agricultural policy. So at these meetings, we could invite the UN working group on UNDROP, and the studies we write could be sent to them. At the EU level, we said it was also important to link the work on UNDROP with the European Citizens Initiative on the Right to Food. Those initiatives, there was a meeting a few months ago, and the initiative will be launched in the coming months, and it includes peasants' rights. So then we said that we could also do work at the national level. We had the example of France that abstained during the vote in 2018 and in last year. But the National Human Rights Commission did a very positive report on UNDROP before the adoption of the declaration, so that could be an ally. Also, there is a collective that called Collective Nourrir, which would include UNDROP in its work and link its work with the UN Working Group. Then we said that the UN Working Group could maybe be discussed or invited at the International Board meeting of FIAN in Portugal in November. Portugal could also be a possible country for a country visit of the working group, as Portugal voted in favor of UNDROP. And another possible country to visit could be in Eastern Europe, for example, Ukraine, where we know that many things are happening now. And also Ukraine plays an important role in the world in terms of cereals production. We could also, I mean, we said we could send communications, violations, in the case of violations, but also like a letter of allegations to the working group. For example, the communications linked to the free trade agreements and the impact on the right to seeds could continue to be sent by FACRI or to FACRI, but this could be also sent jointly by FACRI and by the UN Working Group. As we have seen this morning, these communications are very often sent jointly by many special procedures. Then Raffaele from CETIM said that they are working on a information report on several states in which they describe the gaps in the laws and policies to implement UNDROP. They work with that with La Via Campesina and FIAN, and they focus on the countries that voted in favor of UNDROP. And these reports will be available on the website Defending Peasants' Rights, but also they can be sent to the working group. The UN Working Group could be also invited in a meeting with NGOs participating in monitoring of the plant treaty. And lastly, we had a discussion with our friend from Cameroon, Yvan Youmsi from the RAD, the Réseau d'Acteurs pour le Développement Durable in Cameroon, because he was in the French African group, but it was not enough people, so he came with us. So he said they could be important. There could be a study done in Cameroon on how the laws and policies should be changed to be adapted to UNDROP. Many policies and laws are old and inadequate, for example, in relation to land. And we said that the example of Burkina Faso could be followed, or there could be some inspiration taken from this example because they did such studies. They also did a lot of awareness raising in Burkina Faso with the authorities and the peasant movement. So that's something that could be useful. So he could discuss that with Lucien, the coordinator of Burkina Faso. Voilà, that's it.
Thank you, Christophe, for presenting what the European group has discussed. We almost come to an end of our space. I have posted again the link to the form where you can write into your name, your organization, the country, and your contact. I've seen in the chat that number of you have started exchanging the contacts. So if everyone fills in, then we can provide a complete list of participants that we will send you together with the recording in the 3 languages. But therefore, if you haven't filled it in the morning or when you came later or only in the afternoon, please quickly have a look at it while we are closing the meeting, that we do not miss you on this list. In case, if you get lost there, then please send us a message, and Natasha can put my email and Christophe's email in it, so you could also write to us directly and we add you afterwards. Thank you. So it was a great pleasure to have you in the morning to listen to Christophe and to Geneviève. I think we had quite a lively discussion in the morning, although we were many people, but it worked. Then in the afternoon, we used the space to have freer discussions in smaller groups. And I got the impression from the reporting back of each of the groups, it was lively and it was also inspiring and intensive. On behalf of Geneva Academy, of Fastenaktion and of the RAISE project, I would like to thank all of the participants who've been here, who spent the day with us. I would like to thank the volunteers for the facilitation in the group and for the reporting in the groups. I would like to thank Natasha, my colleague, for the technical support ahead of the meeting and during the meeting. And last but not least, I would like to give big thanks to the team of the interpreters of Emily. So we would like to end the meeting here. I see Emily would like to say something. Yes, go ahead.
I was just waving thank you and thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Yes.
Yeah, and someone said in the chat that
it's also a moment if someone of you would like to say a word of ending. I see Namasiku and maybe also Angel. I don't know if we can have 1 or 2 people to say something at the end if you would like to, and then we would close the meeting. So please, I probably do not see all the hands, but please raise your hands and we try to give you the word. So it seems you are all fine. Then with this, I will close the meeting and yes, have a good evening or afternoon. And for the Latin Americans, I hope you get some sleep before you start your day of your working day.